We hear a lot these days about the divisions, the two Americas. Now we hear about the urban, big state, cosmopolitan types on the one hand, and the rural, small state, down-home types on the other. Of course, it's a false division in many ways. There's a broad spectrum of opinion in both groups. It's just that we have an electoral system that tends to make those divisions worse. Reality, of course, is that there are many more than two groups in our country. Community institutions and traditional affiliations have been shrinking. We're now more likely to identify in smaller and smaller groupings. And I guess to our shame, American culture has always embraced racial distinctions and groupings. Try filling out a census form or a college application. All those little check boxes. Which group are you a part of? The hyphens have been increasingly embraced in our nation as well. Mexican American, African American, etc. For some groups, we never really got that far. Jews, we don't really adopt that hyphen, do we? We're more likely to respond to being American Jews. Still Jews. The hallmark of belonging to a group, that collective identity, is the in-group signifier. As Jews, many times, it's our jokes. Ones that we can tell to one another that another person might not get. I heard one recently from the great Jerry Seinfeld, who said, "This is my favorite Jew joke," meaning for other Jews. Two Gentile businessmen run into each other on the street. And the one sees the other and he says, "Hey, how's business?" And the other one says, "Great." It's a joke that you couldn't possibly explain. In-group identifiers. And let's face it, if you had to go through all the trouble to explain it to somebody, it wouldn't really be funny anymore. These in-group identifiers, well, they ride on assumptions of culture and upbringing, our basic identity. Now, those who don't care so much for Jews have a whole other bunch of jokes that we don't find so funny. And so I have to ask this wonderful assembly, how does it feel when somebody asks you, "Are you a Jew?" There's different ways of being a Jew. I grew up as a Long Island Jew, a subspecies of the New York Jew, North Shore variety. My cultural cues and identifiers are largely from the generations of my family that lived in New York City, or the city as it's called when you're in Long Island. I never really knew what it meant to have only a small number of Jews around me. Anti-Semitism, while present, was rarely expressed. I think I only had one fist fight as a kid over it. I came out on top. Very comfortable with Jewish humor, because, let's face it, there are so many Jewish comedians from the New York area that have helped to define American humor. I have childhood memories of Ratners and hot bagels on Sunday morning. This is irreplaceable and central to my identity. Many in this room grew up in and around Boston, another large and significant Jewish community. People have told me stories that have helped me understand what it was like in their neighborhoods growing up. Though I have to admit, I still do a double take upon hearing Yiddish words with a Boston accent. But for that group of people, a whole different set of associations with what it means to be a Jew, just as valid as mine. Many of us in this room have chosen to be Jews, or we have committed ourselves to people who are. It's a different journey in what it means to be a Jew, because we don't have those childhood experiences to draw upon. We can't assume a background, but still, we in this group find ourselves home. and often these are the Jews who are fiercest in their identity. Some of us grew up as Jews right here on Cape Cod. Again, a different set of expectations. What does it mean to live in a much smaller community? Jews who grew up on the Cape know how very tightly knit that community is and what it means to all know each other. I have to admit, this is also the first place that I've lived where people have spoken to me about maybe keeping a little bit quieter about being Jewish, feeling the need to blend in a little bit more. That's something, frankly, I've learned here in my first years on the Cape. I've also learned the hard way because I used to wear a kippah in public. It caused me enough problems that I don't do that anymore. It's an experience that I know most of the kids that I've taught here at Cape Cod Synagogue have shared to some extent. Most of them can speak about how they have been made to feel different at school. Many of them can speak about hearing Jewish jokes and not the good-natured kind. By middle school, most kids have learned enough from their parents to start spewing what they've gotten at home. I would imagine that most everyone in this room, though, no matter where you grew up, can think of at least one instance where we were put on notice as a Jew that perhaps things were no longer friendly. Nearly all of us have had that experience of discomfort. I've told many people who are studying for conversion across the years, you know you're getting ready for the final step when you take those offhand comments personally, when it's now we, not them. When we're identified as Jews, we are caught in the middle, between our own self-perceptions and those of others that would be pushed upon us. I must again resort to a comedian to explain. Comedians really do have the role of truth-tellers, as surely as they did in a medieval court. Louis C.K. made this observation. Jew is a funny word, because it's the only word that's the polite thing to call a group of people and a slur for the same group, just with a little stank on it. We know the difference right away. And we hold both senses of the word Jew inside ourselves. The way we describe ourselves and the way we know others describe us. I would ask you to think again for a moment the last time you were uncomfortable as a Jew. And I hope it's been a long while. Maybe it was an offhand comment you heard from someone at work talking about a great deal they got and how they Jewed him down. Maybe you were singled out to answer a question in class because a teacher thought, well, kid's Jewish, you'll know better than the others. Maybe it was a joke that someone else thought you should find funny because you were a Jew. We know right away when it isn't right, when someone puts a little stank on it. The adaptive unconscious is that part of the mind that just knows. It's been identified by psychologists as the mind that quickly sizes up the world and makes an instant decision. Made famous by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Blink, if some of you have read it. We know when to avoid someone on the street, don't we? It just takes an instant to size somebody up. We know when we have an instant comfort with people that we've never met before. We also know when our antennae go up. Hey, we know when somebody's trying to scam us almost instantly. That adaptive unconscious is right there. Before we have a chance to think things through and put a rational label on what we know it. So when we hear from somebody, "Are you a Jew?" we can all tell quickly who's asking and why. The ability to do that is a common characteristic of being a Jew, no matter where you grew up. Now, philosemitism can be just as unnerving. You're a Jew. How wonderful. Some of my best friends are Jewish. I'm just fascinated by Judaism. Hey, where do you get good bagels around here? That unconscious mind again. The intuition that comes into play. Can't I just be me? Why does this person have to talk to me like this? Isn't he being awfully familiar? We just know when it isn't right. Whether it's coming from a place of hate and fear or a place of an unnatural fascination, we know when being a Jew means we're being singled out as different. So what do we do with that label, Jew? Sad thing is, the word Jew is not even our invention. We've had a lot of different names through the centuries. The one language where the word Jew doesn't really make so much sense is Hebrew. Instead, we're still Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. If you've got Jewish citizenship, you're Israeli. If you're religious, Dati, you're religious. Yehudi, Jew, is redundant. Who else is identifying as religious when speaking Hebrew? Abraham and Sarah, the first, identified as Ivri, from the Hebrew la'avor, to cross over, presumably because they had come to the land of Israel across the Euphrates. That word survives as the name of our language, Ivrit, Hebrew. Well, that stuck with us until we emerged from Egyptian slavery. At Sinai, we became Israel, named for our ancestor Jacob, Yisrael, and forever known as his descendants. Throughout Jewish literature and rabbinic writings, that is still who we are, Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. When the ancient kingdom of Israel split into two pieces around 930 BCE, the southern half that contained Jerusalem was named for its dominant tribe, Yehudah, Judah. After the northern kingdom was swept away, the remnants of the other tribes blended in with that Judah. Greek and Roman maps labeled the area Judea, Yehuda, and consistently referred to us in that way in the ancient world, both in Latin and Greek, Judeus. So that term, Yehuda, that term came through Old French and then to English to give us Jew, but it still ties back to our ancient Hebrew identity. So, you're a Jew. Yes, I identify as a Jew. I am a descendant of that ancient kingdom and people. I am of the people that stood at Sinai and brought the word of the unity of God and humanity to the whole world. My ancestors defended the walls of Jerusalem when the Roman siege towers approached and didn't flinch when facing certain death. I am a proud survivor and protector of that mighty tribe, its legacy, and its destiny. I am, as some synagogues are named, She'erit Yisrael, a remnant of the people of Israel. Yes, I'm a Jew. We've been called so many things. My professor, Alvin Hyannis, just said Hij, Hebrew, Israelite Jew. And you knew you were part of it because you responded when that name was spoken. Most of all, when we hear that word Jew, we should take pride in who we are and what we bring to the world. I can't help but compare the experience of African Americans in being labeled. When I was a kid, the proper reference was to speak of black people. It was what the leadership asked the rest of us to do, to be sensitive. Before that, the polite term was Negro, which you would never hear today. But if you listen to any speech by Martin Luther King, that's the term that he used. It was preferred in that era. Still earlier, and again a term you would never hear today, colored people, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The reason for the constant change? It was a continual effort to get the rest of America to employ a term other than the most common one in use, the N-word. Maybe it's the circles I move in, but I can't remember the last time I heard that word spoken by someone who wasn't African American. Performers and artists use it. I wish they wouldn't, but I've heard it explained this way. They took it away from the haters and owned that terrible term so no one else could safely speak it. Everyone else can say African American. You may not know, but the word Jew went through a similar evolution. More than 100 years ago, it was so loaded as an insult that when the Reformed Jewish body came together, it was called the Union of American Hebrew Congregations. And it's only in the last decade that we've taken on the word Jew again. It's not so easy with this word Jew. It's the Louis C.K. problem. It's a funny word because it's the polite thing to call a group of people and a slur for the same group. My answer is one of showing unabashed pride. There is nothing insulting in the word, only in the minds of the people who try to use it that way. Those of us here today already know in our hearts the beauty and joy of what it means to be a Jew. So let's not back off of that. The next time you find yourself in a situation where your antennae are up, respond with positivity. So you're a Jew? Yes. And my beloved parents and grandparents were too. I remember sitting at shul and seder with them. I am proud to continue their legacy and name. Yes, I am a Jew, and I know the warmth and meaning of observing our holiday traditions. I know the taste of fresh challah and sweet wine. I know the bitterness of maror and what it represents. I know the sound of a shofar and what and who it calls me to be. Yes, I am a Jew, and I know that Jew is not a name, but a calling and an aspiration to be more than I am today. I am a Jew because my people and my God are counting on me to shine the light of holiness into every dark corner of this world. I am loyal to them both with an unshakable fidelity because I know no other way. Yes, I am a Jew because I know that my life is about more than me and my narrow desires. I am part of a people that for thousands of years has taught that a life of meaning and a life of righteousness are all that stand between us and barbarism. I am a Jew because I believe that living to our ideals and the people of Israel are necessary for the good of all people. Yes, I am a Jew because today, Yom Kippur, is all about responding to that word with pride and with purpose. I am dedicated, no matter how often I may stumble, to getting myself as right as I am able and doing right for others in the year ahead. I'm not Jewish any more than someone is Muslimish or Christianish. I'm a Jew, and there's no stank on that.